She wasn't serious. I knew that the moment she said it, because women like Sylvia Hartwell don't make serious offers to men like me. I was kneeling on her driveway, both hands inside the engine bay of a 1969 Steinway white Jaguar E-Type, when she walked out of the front door holding a glass of sparkling water and said, without any particular expression on her face, "Fix it by Friday and maybe I'll let you keep the house." She meant the carriage house at the end of her property, the one she'd offered as a workshop rental 3 weeks earlier when I'd answered an ad in the Westfield Gazette. She was joking about keeping it, I think. She walked back inside before I could respond, and the door closed behind her with a kind of soft click that only very expensive doors make. I went back to the engine. My name is Grant Holloway. I'm 41 years old. I've been a restoration mechanic for going on 17 years, and for the last 6 of those, I've been doing it alone, running my own one-man shop, filing my own taxes, packing my daughter's lunch every morning before school. Poppy is 8. She has her mother's eyes and my stubbornness, and she has never once in her life let me leave the house without making sure I had coffee in my thermos. She checks. Every single morning. Even when she's half asleep. I moved us to Westfield, Connecticut 18 months before any of this happened. We'd been renting an apartment in Bridgeport, which was fine, but fine wasn't the word I wanted to use about the place where Poppy was growing up. Westfield was quieter, older money, old trees, the kind of town where people still wave from their porches. I found a decent rental on Crandall Street, got Poppy enrolled at Maple Hill Elementary, and started looking for workshop space. Commercial rent in Westfield was what it was, which is how I ended up reading the Gazette. The ad was brief. Carriage house, 1,200 square feet, climate-controlled, separate entrance, available immediately. Contact Hartwell Estate. I almost didn't call. The word estate gave me pause. But I called, and a man named Bernard answered, an assistant of some kind, and he told me the monthly figure, which was 20% below what I'd been paying for a concrete box in Bridgeport. I drove out the next morning. The property was on Aldermore Road, about a mile past the reservoir. The main house was Georgian Revival, 3 stories with a flagstone drive and a row of copper beeches along the western edge of the lawn that must have been there for 100 years. The carriage house sat behind it, connected by a covered walkway. It was everything the ad had promised and more. Wide bay doors, good overhead lighting, sealed concrete floor. I didn't meet Sylvia Hartwell that first day. I met Bernard, who showed me around, handed me a lease, and told me the owner preferred that the tenant not use the main drive. There was a service entrance around the south side of the property. I signed the lease. I saw her for the first time 4 days after I moved in. She was walking across the back lawn toward the carriage house at 9 in the morning, wearing what I would later understand was her version of casual pressed linen trousers, a silk blouse, dark hair pulled back. She was probably 50, maybe 52. She carried herself the way certain people do when they've spent decades in rooms where everyone watches them. She knocked on the open bay door, which struck me as oddly polite given that it was her building. "What are you working on?" she asked. I was cleaning carbon off a set of cylinder heads from a 1971 Porsche 911. I told her that. "Is it yours?" "Clients." She nodded, looked around the space. Her gaze moved slowly over the shelving, the tool layout, the way I'd organized the parts bins. "My father had a Jaguar," she said, "an E-Type. It's in the garage." "The main garage?" "Yes, it hasn't run in 11 years. She said it without particular emotion, the way you'd say a door had been stuck for a while. Then she said, "Do you work on those?" And I said I did, and she said she'd have Bernard send me a key. She left. I went back to the Porsche. The key arrived the next morning in an envelope slipped under the bay door. Inside was a single line on Hartwell letterhead, written by hand in a clean, upright script. "Please have a look when you have time. No urgency. S.H." I made time that afternoon. The main garage was attached to the east side of the house. It held 4 vehicles, a current generation Mercedes S-Class, a Range Rover, a covered shape I didn't investigate, and the Jaguar. It was a 1969 Series 2 E-Type coupe, British racing green, with a black interior. Someone had put a flannel cover over it, and when I pulled the cover back, the paint came up clean and deep in the afternoon light coming through the garage windows. I stood there for a moment just looking at it. Then I got to work. The initial inspection told me most of what I needed to know. The engine was seized. Not catastrophically, but enough. The brake fluid had absorbed moisture for over a decade and would need to be completely replaced. The rubber fuel lines had gone brittle. The carburetor float bowls were dry and gummed. The leather interior was cracked in a few places, but intact. The body was straight. No visible rust on the sills or floor. What I also noticed was something else. Under the passenger seat, pushed back against the seat rail, was a small rectangular object. I reached in and pulled it out. It was a man's wallet, old brown leather, the kind with a bifold and a snap. Inside was a driver's license, expired in 2013, a library card, and a photograph of a young woman. On the back of the photograph, in pencil, someone had written Sylvia, age 22, Lake Placid. I set the wallet on the workbench. I did what I always do when I'm not sure what to do. I went home, made dinner, helped Poppy with her reading assignment, and told her about the car. "What color is it?" she asked. "Dark green, like a bottle of olive oil." She thought about this. "Is it pretty?" "It's one of the most beautiful cars ever built," I said. "You say that about all of them." "This time I mean it more." She smiled and went back to her book. The next morning I sent Bernard a text asking if it would be appropriate to return something I'd found in the vehicle. He responded 10 minutes later. "Mrs. Hartwell will come by at 11. She arrived at 11 exactly. I handed her the wallet across the workbench without saying anything. She looked at it for a moment without touching it. Then she picked it up, opened it, and held very still. "Where did you find this?" "Under the passenger seat." She looked at the license, looked at the library card. Then she took out the photograph and stood with it in her hand for a long time. "My father," she said. "He passed in 2013. I didn't say anything. There was nothing useful to say. "He drove this car every weekend," she said. "Sundays mostly. He'd go out early and be gone for a few hours and come home with whatever he'd picked up at the farm stands on Route 44. She paused. "He didn't tell us he was sick until it was very late. By the time we understood what was happening, he wasn't driving anymore." She tucked the photograph back into the wallet and folded it closed. "I've never been able to make myself deal with the car," she said. "I kept telling myself I'd find someone trustworthy." There was something in the way she said it that I didn't fully understand until later. "I can restore it," I said. "Full mechanical restoration. The body doesn't need much. It would run." She looked at me directly for the first time since we'd started talking. She had dark eyes, steady, the kind that don't give much away. "What would that cost?" I gave her an honest estimate. Parts and labor, no markup on my time beyond standard rate. She quoted a number back to me that was nearly double what I'd said. "That's too much," I told her. She looked mildly surprised, like people didn't often say that to her. "I'm aware of what my mechanic charged for his last restoration project," she said. "Your number is too low." "My number's fair." "Fair for whom?" "For both of us," I said. She studied me for a moment. Then she said, "All right," and left. I sourced the parts over the following week. A rebuilt carburetor from a supplier in Vermont. Correct spec brake lines from a specialist in Ohio. Fresh Smith's instruments still in the box from an estate sale in Massachusetts. The leather I would send out to a shop in Hartford that I'd used before and trusted. The engine would take the longest. It needed a proper strip, inspection, machine work on the head, and careful reassembly. During that time I started to see Sylvia more often, not by design or not on my part. She would appear at the carriage house door in the morning with 2 cups of coffee, not asking, just handing one through, and sometimes she would stand in the main garage while I worked, not talking, just watching. She asked questions occasionally, real ones, about how the carburetors worked and why British cars from that era ran so hot, and what exactly the engine had to do to make the sound they made. I answered her. That was all. I answered her and went back to work. Poppy came with me one Saturday when school was out. She sat on a stool at the workbench and drew in her notebook while I worked on a cylinder head. Sylvia came in around 10, saw Poppy, and stopped. "Hello," Poppy said, very matter-of-fact. "Hello," Sylvia said. "What are you drawing?" "The car, but I made it purple because green is boring." Sylvia looked at the drawing. The exaggerated curves of the E-Type's body, rendered in violet crayon, and something shifted in her face. Not much. Just a small softening around the eyes. "Purple suits it," she said. Poppy considered this seriously. "I think so too." After Sylvia left, Poppy looked at me and said, "She's nice." "She's polite," I said. "That's the same thing sometimes." I didn't have an answer for that. The restoration took 9 weeks. I worked on it around my other clients, staying later some evenings, coming in on Sunday mornings while Poppy was at her grandmother's in New Haven. The mechanical work came together cleanly, the engine rebuilt well, no surprises, good tolerances, a solid head once the machine shop in Torrington finished their work. The fuel system was straightforward, brakes flushed and bled, new hoses throughout. The leather came back from Hartford better than I'd expected. The shop had matched the original tan almost exactly and had been careful with the original stitching pattern on the seats. The detail that took me the longest was non-mechanical. About halfway through the restoration, while I was cleaning inside the door panels, I found something tucked into the driver's door pocket that I nearly missed entirely. A small folded piece of paper, yellowed, with a handwritten list on it. 5 items: gas, coffee, Route 44 stands, check tire pressure. Stop at Lakewood if open. It was a Sunday morning checklist, his routine, written in his own hand. I sat with it for a while. I thought about the wallet. I thought about the photograph. I thought about a man who drove out alone on Sunday mornings because he needed time that was his own and who had gotten sick and not told his family until there was almost no time left, and whose car had sat in a garage for 11 years because his daughter couldn't quite bring herself to let it go. I folded the paper carefully and set it with the wallet in a small envelope I found in my truck. 2 days before the car was finished, I found the other thing. I was doing a final check of the wiring harness when I noticed the replacement section. It wasn't original. The color coding was slightly off. The connector type was a later spec. Someone had replaced a section of harness at some point, probably in the late 1990s or early 2000s based on the materials. That wasn't unusual. What was unusual was where the replacement ended and the original began. There was a short section where the two joined inside the fuse panel, and behind the fuse panel, tucked against the firewall, was a small cloth pouch. Navy blue. Drawstring. I opened it. Inside was a ring. A woman's engagement ring. Platinum band, round diamond, antique setting. Beside it, wrapped in a piece of tissue, was a folded card. On the card, in the same upright handwriting as the Sunday list, were 4 words. "In case she says yes." I stood very still in the garage. I understood then. He'd hidden it there. Before a drive on a Sunday because he was going to ask someone and he wanted to make sure the ring was safe, and something had interrupted that, or maybe it had already happened and the ring had come back with him and he'd simply forgotten to retrieve it. Or maybe the day had never come and he'd held on to the intention for reasons he never explained to anyone. There was no way to know. What I knew was that this didn't belong to me. None of it did. The wallet, the list, the ring, they were his and they were hers now, whatever she chose to do with them. I put everything in the envelope, sealed it, and wrote her name on the front. I finished the car the following afternoon. I connected the battery, checked the fuel pressure, set the choke, and turned the key. The engine caught on the 3rd crank. It settled into a fast idle, rough, for about 20 seconds, and then smoothed out into the sound that a healthy inline-6 Jaguar makes, a low, even, slightly offbeat burble that you feel as much as hear. I let it warm up to operating temperature. Everything read correctly. Oil pressure steady, temperature normal, no leaks. I took it out the service entrance and drove it slowly down Aldermore Road for about a mile, then back. It pulled straight. The brakes were firm. 4th gear was smooth. I brought it back into the garage and shut it off. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment before I got out. The leather smell was right. The gauges, with their cream faces and orange needles, glowed amber in the low afternoon light. Outside the garage window, the copper beaches were starting to turn. I thought about a man I had never met, driving out on Sunday mornings in his car with a list in his pocket and a ring hidden in the fuse panel, and a daughter who grew up and built something large and complicated out of her life and still couldn't get rid of his car. I got out and went to get the envelope. Bernard had told me Sylvia would be home after 4. I knocked on the side door of the main house at 4:15. She answered herself, which surprised me slightly. "It's done," I said. She looked at me. "Does it run?" "I drove it this afternoon. It runs well." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'd like to see it." We walked to the garage together. I opened the doors. She stood in the entrance for a long time without going in, looking at the car. The green paint had cleaned up beautifully. The chrome on the bumpers and the wire wheels caught the late light. She walked in slowly and stood beside the driver's door. She put her hand on the roof, very lightly. "It smells like him," she said quietly. I didn't say anything. "He used to come home on Sundays and smell like oil and coffee," she said. "We thought it was funny. We teased him about it." She was quiet for a moment. "I have something for you," I said. I held out the envelope. She looked at it, took it carefully. She opened it right there, standing next to the car, and I watched her face as she went through each thing. The wallet she already knew about, but she held it again. Then the folded list. She read it, and her expression shifted in a way I didn't fully know how to describe. Not crying, but the thing that lives just before crying. Then she reached the tissue and unwrapped it. She looked at the ring for a long time. She read the card. She stood there with it in her hands without speaking, and I stood about 6 feet away and looked at the garage floor, because some moments belong to the person living them and not to the person watching. After a while she said, "Did you know what this was when you found it?" I had a guess. "And you didn't say anything. I thought you should find it yourself." She looked at the ring again. Then she set it carefully back in the tissue and folded it and placed everything back in the envelope and held it against her chest. "I think," she said slowly, "that he was going to ask my mother after her first surgery. He always said she came back different, lighter, somehow, happier, and I think he was going to ask her again, like a second time, like renewing something." "Did he?" "I don't know. She's never said." She paused. "She's still alive. She's 81. She lives in Litchfield. She might know, or she might not." She turned and looked at the car again. "I'm going to drive it to Litchfield," she said. "On Sunday. I'm going to take her for a drive." It wasn't something she was asking my opinion about. It was something she was simply saying out loud, the way people sometimes say things that become real by being spoken. I gave her the bill the next morning. She paid it within the hour and added 20%. I sent it back. She added it again. We went back and forth on it twice before I gave up, which I think she was counting on. She called me 3 days after the Sunday drive. I was at the carriage house working on a customer's 1965 Mustang. "She knew," Sylvia said when I answered. I waited. He had asked her the day she came home from the hospital. She said yes. A pause. She had no idea the ring existed. He must have had it made separately, for the formal proposal he never got to do. Another pause, longer. She cried, and she laughed, and then we drove out to Route 44 and bought half the farm stand. I didn't say anything for a moment. "That's a good Sunday," I finally said. "Yes," she said, "it was." She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "The carriage house lease comes up for renewal in 4 months." "I know." I was thinking the rate should stay the same, as long as you want it. "That's fair," I said. "And I was thinking." She paused, and I could hear something careful in her voice, something measured, like she was choosing the next words more deliberately than usual. "If Poppy wanted to come on Saturdays, there's a good deal of room in the back garden. She could bring her notebook." I looked out the open bay door at the copper beeches along the fence line. The leaves were mostly down now, the branches bare against the November sky. "I'll ask her," I said. I did ask her. That evening at dinner I told Poppy that the lady whose garage I worked in had a big garden, and if she wanted she could come draw there on Saturdays. Poppy put her fork down and looked at me with the very specific look she reserves for when she thinks I'm missing something obvious. "She's the purple car lady," she said. "The car is green," I said. "I made it purple," Poppy said patiently, as though this settled the matter. "Can I bring my colored pencils?" "Sure," I said. "Okay," she said, and picked up her fork. That night, after she was asleep, I stood in the kitchen for a while with my coffee, thinking about a wallet and a list and a ring in a cloth pouch, and a man who drove out on Sunday mornings and came home smelling like oil and coffee, and the things we leave behind in the places we love without knowing we're leaving them. I taped Poppy's purple drawing of the Jaguar to the refrigerator. I turned off the kitchen light. I went to bed. I've thought about that ring a lot since then. A small thing hidden in a cloth pouch behind a fuse panel, waiting 11 years for someone to find it. No one knew it was there. The man who put it there was gone, and yet it still mattered. To Sylvia, to her mother, to a Sunday morning neither of them had fully understood until that moment in the garage. That's the part that stays with me. Not the restoration work, not the car itself. The fact that doing things the right way, carefully, honestly, without cutting corners, is what put me in a position to find it at all. I could have missed it. A less thorough inspection would have. If I'd rushed or skipped the wiring harness check, or decided the fuse panel wasn't worth getting into, the ring would still be there. Sylvia's mother would still be carrying a half-finished memory. That Sunday drive never happens. None of it. There's something in that I keep coming back to. The quality of the work determined what was possible afterward. Not the outcome. I couldn't have predicted the outcome, but the range of what could happen. Careful work opens doors that careless work keeps shut, and you almost never know in advance which door is going to matter. I wasn't trying to find anything. I was just trying to do the job right. That's the only part I actually controlled, and it turned out to be enough. I think about Poppy watching me work and drawing her purple Jaguar in the notebook she carries everywhere. She asks questions constantly. Why does this piece connect there? What does that sound mean? How do you know when something's wrong? I try to answer every one of them, not because I think she'll grow up to be a mechanic, but because the habit of paying attention is the same wherever you apply it. Noticing what's actually there, rather than what you expect to be there. That's a thing worth learning young. I'm still learning it. And the stubbornness it takes to keep going when things are harder than they should be, that's not something I can teach her by talking about it. She has to see it. She sees it on the mornings I leave before 6 because a job needs more time than I quoted. She sees it on the Saturdays I stay at the workbench past dark. She checks my thermos every morning, which I've always thought was her way of saying she's paying attention too. Kids understand a lot more than we think they do, and they remember everything. What I gave Sylvia wasn't just a running engine. It was proof that someone had paid attention to something her father loved, that somebody had treated it with the same seriousness he had. I think that mattered to her more than she could easily say, and what she gave back, the fair rate, the long lease, the open garden on Saturdays, wasn't charity. It was one careful person recognizing another. Things balance out, not by magic, but by the accumulation of choices that build on each other. You do good work, you return what isn't yours. You tell the truth about the price. You don't look away from the difficult thing inside the fuse panel. And somewhere down the line a door opens that you didn't even know was there, and it leads somewhere that makes the whole long effort worth it. I'm still renting the carriage house. Poppy still brings her colored pencils on Saturdays. The Jaguar gets driven on Sundays now, out past the reservoir and onto Route 44, the same road a man used to drive alone, a long time ago, with a list in his pocket and a good intention hidden close to his chest. Some things take a long time to find their way home.